I think that's also something to do with the blue light. I think that's important, but the technology takes us away from nature, and it takes us away from mindfulness and prayer and just sitting in silence and connecting with ourselves. And that's an issue, isn't it? Because we are spiritual beings. If we don't give ourselves time to connect spiritually, connect with nature, then we end up losing that part. And that's dreadful if we lose that part, because that is what makes us who we are. I think that's a big problem, is the disconnect.
It's my absolute pleasure to introduce my esteemed guest today, Michelle Davies. With over 500 five-star testimonials and an astonishing 99% success rate, Michelle has dedicated nearly 3 decades to helping individuals of all ages reduce suffering and achieve profound self-healing. As an internationally acclaimed brain care expert, healer in osteopathy, health consultant, mentor and author, Michelle has transformed the lives of over 57,000 people worldwide. Her expertise in cranial, sacral, and osteopathic techniques have not only facilitated remarkable healing, but have also been recognized and recommended. Michelle is the author of the widely acclaimed book, Miracle Worker, in which she shares her extraordinary experiences in healing and mental clarity, where she explores groundbreaking methods for enhancing mental well-being. Her work is rooted in professionalism, care, and an unwavering commitment to empowering individuals to take charge of their health. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. That was a great introduction.
You're most welcome. Give us a bit of your background. Let's get your story in your own words.
Yeah, sure. So at the age of 13, I decided to train to be an osteopath. I had been brought up in a family of healers. I wanted to do something that would help people heal naturally. That's the way I'd been raised. And there wasn't a great deal of choice at the time. It was being a chiropractor or an osteopath, because I also wanted the university life. My mum was a healer, but she'd been on so many different courses. I don't know how many courses she would have been on, but she was practicing at least 15 different therapies. I thought, I'd just like to do one to start with. And I'd like some fun at the age of 18 as well. So I chose a degree in osteopathy. I moved to London when I was 18, and I trained as an osteopath for 4 years. I graduated when I was 22. I set up a private practice and worked in private practice for the last 27 years. The first 24 years, I maintained the title osteopath. And then for the last few years, I'm now a brain care expert or a healer in osteopathy. I help all ages, from 2 days young through to people that have got arthritis in their 90s and age-related problems like dementia or Parkinson's. And it's all hands-on, promoting a healing response within that person's body. So they do the healing. I'm like a facilitator, and it covers a whole range of symptoms that patient arrives in my clinic with. So it could be spiritual, emotional, mental, or physical. And we can heal on all levels. We just sometimes need a helping hand. And that's really where I come in. I tend to help people that have been on many paths of healing, but they haven't found the key to why they can't get better from that problem. I tend to be the last resort for more people than I am the first resort. People may have exhausted pathways of medication or surgery when they see me. I quite like that, though. I quite like I'm right at the end of the path of people. And then on the other hand, I do see people further than the first time, and that's always then a surprise.
I'm sure within time that will change polarity and you'll be the first resort, not the last.
I hope so. I think because I've got a different title, let's say, for the last few years, and I've got a sense of freedom now that I've never had before, and I can speak out now, and I don't have someone telling me what I can say and what I can't say, because I've always been safe and I will always continue to be safe. So that's never been an issue. Of course, my standards are really high, but I don't have an authority above me telling me you can't say this and you can't say that. So now I am free. And then, like you say, maybe then I can be the first person that someone comes to, because they can hear the work that I do because it's the truth about what I do rather than it being masked.
Or if you're cramped by a top-down authority, it doesn't allow you to liberate the essence of healing in the way that is part of your cosmic blueprint. That is your contribution to why you're here on this planet, to be that agency of amplification, a beacon of transmission to transfer that so people can start the process of healing themselves. You're creating and facilitating an environment, an infrastructure where they're able to facilitate their own healing, which is fantastic. Now, thank you so much for your book, Mental Clarity. I found it absolutely fascinating. I read through it in one sitting, but I'm going to reread it again. I want to touch on this modern epidemic in our fast-paced digital world where more people are experiencing what is termed brain fog, that frustrating state of mental cloudiness that affects memory, focus, and cognitive clarity. Recent research suggests this isn't just about feeling tired, it's a complex interplay of lifestyle, environment, and neurological factors. What patterns have you observed in the increasing prevalence of brain fog among different age groups?
It is really common in all ages, but I suppose the younger the person is, it's presenting more of a behavior issue. They would seem to be not listening, not focusing and concentrating. It's the same essence, it's the brain fog, but it does affect across all ages, from very young until very old. It's often the predisposing symptom to something greater if it's not addressed. A lot of people would not necessarily think to take brain fog seriously, not really see it either, that it's a symptom of dysfunction in the body. But if you don't address it, it becomes more of a problem with brain function. Then you're not able to achieve your full potential because you haven't addressed the brain fog. It holds people back from promotions at work or improve relationships. It's also spiritually not being able to connect as well as you could do. So it affects physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Be aware that brain fog could be a predisposing factor to something greater down the line. And sometimes that's not necessarily for 10 years. It's important, I think, to take it seriously and people to just have an understanding that it is a symptom of something.
Which is nature's way of telling you that something needs to change because, like you're saying, something like that can climb in its potency and you may not be aware. It's a bit like type 2 diabetes, where the symptoms associated with it can not present themselves as a symptom that you're conscious of. But eventually, over the years, they build, and sometimes it's too late.
Yes.
How has our modern lifestyle, particularly our relationship with technology, contributed to this rise in cognitive issues?
I think that's also something to do with the blue light. I think that's important. But the technology takes us away from nature and it takes us away from mindfulness and prayer and just sitting in silence and connecting with ourselves. And that's an issue, isn't it? Because we are spiritual beings. If we don't give ourselves time to connect spiritually, connect with nature, then we end up losing that part. And that's dreadful if we lose that part because that is what makes us who we are. I think that's a big problem, is the disconnect, because it's easier just to be looking at a screen than it is to be sitting by yourself, contemplating or studying your own body and thinking about what's my body actually telling me? What's my being saying about myself? We tend to look outside of ourselves rather than inside ourselves. But the answers are inside, but we have to connect with that. And that means sitting with ourselves rather than having a screen in front of us.
Have you made any surprising discoveries about brain fog in your practice?
Yes, I would say that this links with anxiety and people who have lived with anxiety for so many years that it turns into an issue where they're hearing voices and those voices might be telling them to hurt themselves. And that's actually leading to them self-harming or making attempts on their life. That's been the most staggering of my work in more recent years, because I've been presented with more patients that are suffering mental ill health, but it's all coming from the part of the brain which is not detoxing, and it's an unhealthy part of the brain. And that's actually the physical part of it that's leading them to having this mental ill health. I've seen more cases of suicide ideation and depression, anxiety, OCD, panic, paranoia, and schizophrenia, these sorts of conditions. But it still all stems back to brain fog at the beginning. One of the first signs, because that's the body's way of showing you that part of the brain is not healthy. Unfortunately, the glymphatic system, which is the brain's natural ability to clear toxins, hasn't been known about in the science world for very long, maybe 14 years. It's not very long to be discovering it. Whereas people like myself have been working with the glymphatic system for 27 years. And there are way more people that have been working who maybe be deceased now, but they were working before with the cranial sacral system. They were working with the glymphatic system, but it's probably passed off as natural, alternative, complementary medicine because it's not science backed, and it just gets dismissed and covered over. The issue with me not maintaining my title, that's also a problem, because if people are maintaining their title, then they are restricted about what they can speak about and what they can do. So they don't have the numbers doing what they should be doing to be able to promote around the world. This system is active and it can be worked on, and there can be healing there.
I've never known about the glymphatic system, and as I understand it, it's the brain's natural cleaning mechanism that operates during sleep. It's a fascinating discovery which revolutionizes our understanding of why quality sleep is so crucial for mental clarity. Can you give us a brief explanation of how the glymphatic system works during sleep?
Evidence is that the glymphatic system is the fluid system which bathes the brain, the spinal cord, and all of the nerves. It moves at a rate of 8 to 10 times a minute, and it flushes the toxins from around the brain. They say it only happens when you go into a deep sleep. So you'd need to be asleep for a few hours before it starts to work, and cleanses the brain. It takes the proteins, which is like a toxin that comes off the brain naturally, happens with all of us. But the glymphatic system, this fluid system of cerebrospinal fluid, flushes those proteins away, which keeps the brain healthy. And they found that if the proteins stay and stick, that's one of the causes of Alzheimer's and dementia. So it's important that we go into a deep sleep so that we can allow the body to do that. The theory is that the cells in the brain go through a shrinking process when we sleep. And as the brain cells shrink, there's space around the brain cells for the fluid to wash over, to clean. And that goes into the lymphatic system through the cervical spine, through the neck. So there is a connection with the lymphatic system of the body. They've only recently discovered that, and they need to do more discovery because they don't know the full extent of it. Side sleeping is meant to be better, not sleeping on your back, but actually sleeping on your side. I've read different information on whether you should sleep on your left or your right. I'm not sure which is correct because I've read different papers on both. So I would just say sleeping on your side aids that fluid to flow better. And we need to be hydrated through the day so that also we can help that process at night, which means restricting alcohol, caffeine, and processed foods to support the health of that system. If you hydrate through the day, that's going to make a difference at night. And if you're careful with what toxicity you're having into your body, like through the foods that you're eating and the drinks you're drinking, even tap water, for example, needs to be filtered. Again, you're helping that process. We need to be mindful that what we eat and drink is going to play a part in the toxicity around the brain. It's already got a difficult job as it is to clean the brain. We don't want to be adding to it. There's enough pollution in the sky, in the air, in the water, in the food. So if we can do our bit during the day to make it easier for the brain to be able to do the cleansing at night, exercising as well and detoxing, going through periods of maybe fasting from the evening, 6 or 7 p.m. until maybe 12 o'clock the next day. People find it easier than fasting for 2 or 3 days at a time. That's in essence, how it works. The big thing I found with all of the mental health challenges I've seen, they've all got what I would term a concussion. There's been an injury to the head, like a pressure, that something physical has happened and it's caused a blockage directly in that part of the lymphatic system. That's what I connect with my hands. I can feel it. It's a very dense, heavy feeling, and sometimes doesn't feel like there's any energy there. It's really like low vibration and flat.
What are the most common sleep related mistakes that you see in your practice that people make that affect their cognitive function?
Going to bed far too late. We need to be in bed by 10 p.m. That's almost the latest that you should be in bed, really. The number of patients that I have that would be asleep at midnight, or even 1, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., the time that you go to bed is important because you need the number of hours to be able to go into the deeper sleep. Then the drinking of caffeine and alcohol, because if you've had even just a couple of glasses of wine in the evening with an evening meal, it's going to keep your brain in some alert state. The same with the caffeine. So having the awareness, you can have alcohol if you want to, or you can have caffeine, but there's perhaps an amount that you should have and also timing of it. But I have also read that no amount of alcohol is good for the brain. It's toxicity for the brain. So if you've already got a predisposition to a problem with the brain, alcohol is definitely something you would want to avoid. So some of my patients that I've treated have totally come off alcohol because they start to feel better because of the treatment. Then they go back to drinking alcohol. They can see that the brain fog comes back. They can see it's a choice they have to make. I can help them, but if they're going to continue eating or drinking the wrong thing, it may undo the natural process of healing. All I'm doing is facilitating healing. I'm not doing a fix because the body's changing all the time. So we have to work as a pair together and support each other in that process of healing. I would say that the alcohol, the coffee, the sleep time, people having good sleep hygiene. So perhaps preparing for going to sleep with dim light rather than the bright lights. The same with the blue light. So it's like switching off your television and your phone and iPad at least an hour before you really want to be asleep. If you want to be asleep by 10, definitely before 9 p.m., everything really needs to be switched off and lights need to be dim. Maybe you've had a bath in Epsom salts because you've got the magnesium in Epsom salts. That helps us to sleep. So they're the main things, I think. It's what people are eating and drinking and what they're doing in the evening time before sleeping. And also breathing techniques. If people were focusing on deep breathing in the evening, maybe doing a meditation or going through prayers or centering themselves, focusing on the breath, because that helps us to relax when we do deep breathing because we stimulate the vagus nerve. And if you stimulate your vagus nerve, it pushes you into your parasympathetic system, which is the opposite of the sympathetic flight and fright, which keeps you alert, doesn't help you switch off to go to sleep. So if you do deep breathing before you go to sleep, it just helps to calm the nervous system. Then you're ready to be able to go into the deep sleep.
Yeah, it's the brake pedal, isn't it? Not the accelerator pedal.
Yeah, that's a good way of
Yeah.
saying that. Yeah, I like that.
The emotional component in this is there's a strong connection between emotional well-being and cognitive function, particularly through the amygdala's role in processing emotions and stress responses. How do emotional states impact cognitive function? Can you share some examples of how stress magnification techniques have helped your patients overcome brain fog?
Yes. So if you're in a heightened emotional state, you're in a stress response, it's not a good time to make a decision because your flight fright is about running away or preparing for the worst. You're prepped, you're ready. And the stress response is going to probably help you make the wrong decision about something. You need to be in a relaxed state to make a decision. There's no good in a stress response because probably what's going to come out also is anger. The emotions that you might not want, it wouldn't help in any situation. It's much better to be in a calm situation when making decisions. And we procrastinate as well. If we're stressed, the amygdala is affected, then we're going to delay something and then it's not going to necessarily be productive. So the amygdala is within the temporal bone of the brain and it's like the side of the head. A lot of my patients have a problem in that area. Without the patient needing to tell me their history, although they do give me their history, but they can't possibly tell me everything. So many times I'm able to tell the patient how they're feeling, which they won't have written down, because I can feel the restriction around their amygdala.
Mm.
I can feel the blockage and the restrictions. So then I would say, I don't think you're handling stress very well. I don't think you're able to regulate your emotions very well. You'll be like flighting and fighting between the two and can be quite aggressive and short-tempered, not patient. So it presents in these sorts of situations.
Can you share some examples of how stress magnification techniques have helped your patients overcome brain fog?
Humming, singing, deep breathing, and long sighing. There's a particular technique you could do with 2 breaths out, like a crying response. You're not crying, but you're replicating that crying response. Patients report they can make a decision better if they've done these techniques beforehand. They can relax themselves and cope better with stress. These are so easy to do just with humming or chanting. It doesn't really matter what you chant, what you say, the sound that you make. I think it's more about the long outward breath. When you're saying E, it continues, and it's that outward breath that's stimulating the vagus nerve. I do warn patients you could be quite irritating to be around if you're humming all day.
Which is what the ancients did to engender a response to allow the parasympathetic nervous system, but also to connect to something higher than them. Spiritual well-being plays a role in cognitive health. What role does spiritual well-being play in cognitive health based on your experience?
Yes, absolutely. I find that if there's a blockage within their glymphatic system, then they are really struggling to connect spiritually. Some patients visit me because they know there's a block. They're not able to be like a receiver, and they used to be. And they feel like there's this disconnect, but they feel like an abandonment. So the spiritual side comes in because we can term the cerebrospinal fluid the Christ oil, or it's the sacred secretion, or our breath of life. To a scientist, they'd say that's nonsense, it's cerebrospinal fluid. But because I am a spiritual being and I recognize I'm a spiritual being, I can come from a different angle because of my perception. My understanding is that we're spirit, we are part of the creator, and we want to be able to connect with our creator, our higher self. We struggle with that if we've got this blockage within that flow. If we have that blockage, it tends to cause us to think and say things very negatively. It causes us to be disempowered, and the negative talk then constant, and it's difficult to switch that off. Some people would say that's a demonic attack on that person, and that I find really interesting because I have patients that will talk to me about that, and they say they are hearing voices. Because I'm working with these patients, that also helps me learn more about the spiritual connection of people as well, because these are real people with real issues being very open with me and talking about what they're hearing in their head. I've come to see over the years of working that if we have a trauma, and that can come from birth, unfortunately, if we have a trauma, it's like a gateway for that negative entity or demonic possession or disconnect from God or from your creator or your higher being. It's a pathway in. And that's sad because that could be present from that child's birth. And then they have felt disconnected their entire life and they haven't had a connection. I find that really upsetting because that's not been a choice that individual has made. It's because of a physical trauma that's happened through the birth process. That could be a forceps delivery or a von twos, or it could just be that the baby's got stuck in the cervix and then is at a cesarean delivery. Parent is unaware that they had an issue with their cranium, but the trauma has created this disconnection right from day one. It's trying to work with that injury, help the body to heal and remove that blockage, because then they can connect again with their higher being, their higher self, and have a more spiritually fulfilled life. Then you find that the negativity goes away because the negative thoughts are coming from that congestion within the system. So if it's heavy and not flowing and it's inflamed, it's toxic. It leads to toxic actions because the toxic thoughts can only create a toxic action. The toxic action is a toxic result, and it brings about toxic habits. All of it could be from an injury to the head. Yes, it can get very deep in my clinic room.
I'd love to unpack some of that maybe in another episode. I think that would be so useful for so many people to understand, be able to align their faculty to that knowledge.
We can do it. Yeah.
I want to move on to environmental factors. I'm trying to cover some of the things in your book. And this is probably more on a surface level, because each one of these topics, they sound simple, but they're also very profound. And there's a lot of depth that we could go into. So I'm going to move on to each particular topic, if that's okay. Within our modern environments, I see they present unique challenges to our brain health, especially from electromagnetic fields to chemical exposures. If we can start to understand these factors, that can become crucial in addressing cognitive issues. What environmental factors do you find most commonly contribute to brain fog?
It's the electromagnetic field, the amount of screen use, the amount of Wi-Fi that we're exposed to. It's all about balance, and that's not balanced by enough grounding and enough time being outside without our shoes and socks on and literally grounding ourselves with nature or hugging trees or in prayer. And I think the problem is the imbalance between those two. If you're surrounded by computers and Wi-Fi and you've got a job where you are using Wi-Fi all day and screen use, then that's going to be in balance to the amount of time that you're spending outside in nature or connecting with your higher self in meditation or prayer. So I would say it's the electromagnetic radiation that the issue is. There's something I use every day, which is the biofrequency music. This is technology which actually analyzes my voice. I speak into the technology for about 10 seconds. It picks out 8,000 frequencies in the voice. And the technology is able to then look at 12 notes within the spoken voice. It pulls out 4 notes which are out of balance. 3 of the notes would be too high, producing too much sound. One of the notes is not producing enough sound. Then the technology gives me back music, 4 notes to listen to, which then brings the balance of emotions in the body. And it's extraordinary to read the report. It will show the positive and negative emotion associated with that note in my voice. It's so accurate. But that's talking about the energy, and we are energy. Every cell in our body is vibrating, connecting and communicating with every other cell in the body. And we are an energy field. And again, that's not something that's really spoken about very much, but we have a field of energy around us. We need to protect that as well and be aware that we're not just here in the physical body. There is this energy which is actually outside of us. It's how we can tell when someone's walking towards us what type of mood they're in by looking at them, because you can sense it almost before they've even spoken. But this technology is about you speaking, and it's giving information, because we know when someone speaks to us, what type of mood are they in. You can tell if someone is really low and depressed, and you can tell if someone is energized and high. We need to protect this energy system that we live within, and we are all connected as well. So our energy is affecting the people closest to us.
I remember seeing Kirlian photography about 30 years ago. I think it was at the Mind, Body and Spirit. They were able to photograph your aura, your electromagnetic system, which goes into collapse and reformation every 7 seconds. There's a whole dynamism within that. I can stand next to somebody and feel their energy, whether there's a compatibility of alignment or a resonance there. There's a mismatch of some kind. There's something off about it. Or you can walk into a room, which I've done many times, and no one's been there, and I get a sense that something has happened in that room, whatever it might be. But I get a sense there's energy that's been deposited in there that hasn't been cleared. If you look in the East, they clap out the corners of rooms and light incense to clear the energy. In ancient times, in Chinese theatre, they never used to clap after a performance because that would disperse the energy that the performers had created. So they want to keep that energy within the room. But what we do is we clap. Why do we clap? It clears the energy.
That reminds me, we can put plants, cactus plants, and
Right.
crystals. A crystal is from the earth. So if we've got these earthly things around us, and maybe you could be having your feet on an earthing mat because it's impossible to go outside, these things can make a difference to the
Mm.
radiation and the electromagnetic field.
If you study different countries, they all have different minerals and different crystals in the earth. And that brings out a radiation which you breathe in through the nose up into the circle of Willis. That affects your accent, your perception. Some people might dismiss it, but I find it interesting that, say, I wanted to move and live in the United States of America, you are called an alien, which is a very strange term. Then, if you've been there for 7 years, once you've breathed in the energy of that land, then you can swear allegiance. I find that fascinating research. Something I'm doing at the moment is looking at all these different countries and different crystals and energy stones actually in the earth and what they emit and how they connect to planets.
Really interesting.
In terms of the gut brain connection, I know that everybody's talking about the microbiome, but scientists have discovered what many ancient healing traditions have long known about, that the gut and the brain are intimately connected. I think it's called the second brain in our digestive system, communicates directly with our cognitive function through we now call the gut brain axis. How did you first discover this connection between gut health and cognitive function in your practice?
Because I see that so often with a patient with brain fog, usually has also got a digestive issue. Most mental health conditions, whatever that condition is, that person is going to have most likely a gut issue. They might not have a regular bowel motion. They may have distension of their abdomen or discomfort, constipation, diarrhea, or some issue around their stomach. It comes out in the questioning of that patient. We look at the whole health of someone, all of their systems. That's just what they then tell
Mm,
you. So when I'm treating someone's cognitive health, I'm also looking at the health of their digestive system, and we talk about that. Often there's a leaky gut. So if I find a problem keeps reoccurring in someone and it's puzzling why something has returned and it feels like a concussion again, but the person hasn't had a bang to their head again, it's the leaky gut. They call it reconcussion. If you have a leaky gut, which means that the toxins are able to leak out of the digestive system and go towards the brain and cross the blood-brain barrier, that's how we can reconcuss ourselves. If a patient returns, the finding is pretty much know that they've got a leaky gut, and actually they need to address that. Because there's only so much I can do, and I can't stop the patient eating particular foods or not doing what I'm asking them to do to support their health. They do need to take more responsibility then for what are they actually putting into their system. There may be foods they should avoid and be taking prebiotics and probiotics and drinking more water. And definitely, if they're constipated, they've got to get rid of the constipation. The brain is not going to improve if you're
mm,
constipated. It is our second brain, and our immune system is reliant upon our digestive system. If you're constipated, it's bad for the entire health of your body, including your brain. That's not that well known. So I try and encourage people to take seriously their digestive system. Really, we should be evacuating each meal. So when someone even says they go once a day to the toilet, then even that's not enough because they're not evacuating enough. I'll never forget seeing my mum, because my mum does colonic hydrotherapy, and I would have some sessions with her. I thought my gut was great.
mm.
Until I had a session with my mum. She did this colonic hydrotherapy on me. Shocked with what came away, because there's a tube and you can see what comes out of your digestive system into this tube. I was absolutely horrified because I thought, where has all of that crap come from? Because I'm all right, I'm going to the toilet regularly, but where has all that been? That really opened my eyes to my own body. That was sitting in the nooks and crannies in the intestines. And that is not because
No.
That's giving toxins, which are then going to go to the brain.
And I would imagine a precursor to brain fog.
That's right. Yes, it is going to be causing brain fog.
Mm. Ignorance is bliss, but it's also fatal. It's important to understand more about this whole gut brain connection. And I know a lot's been written about it, but can you briefly explain how the vagus nerve plays a role in this gut brain connection?
Yes, so the vagus nerve leaves the base of the skull at the occiput. So the occiput's the bone at the back of the head, and there are two holes either side. And the vagus nerve goes through those holes and innervates every organ in the body. You've got different roles that the left vagus nerve contributes to and the right vagus nerve. That is the superhighway between the brain and the gut. I often find with someone who has a gut brain issue, there's a problem in their neck, at the top of the neck where it meets the skull bone, the occiput. Without the patient explaining anything, I can already say to them, I think you've probably got a gut issue, because that's the most likely area that people have the symptoms. People often don't have the symptoms that their liver or their kidney or their heart, not necessarily. It's more the digestive system where they're going to see that they've got symptoms. And this often then shows that there's this vagus nerve issue. So it's because the vagus nerve innervates all of the organs of the body and it comes out the top of the neck. It's the highway between the two. And because of where it passes through the system, you can access it to help the body go into a relaxation state, which then enables that person to heal, because you can't heal if you're in a stress response all the time.
Is that called vagal tone?
Yes, you could call it vagal tone. We can then access the vagal tone, the vagus nerve, to support ourselves and our healing by tapping into that. So if it's restricted because it's being pulled at the occiput, you'd want to then have the occiput like realign so that you can take the pressure off the vagus nerve, which is why the treatment I do can be important for the vagus nerve to function better. Because if you've got the occiput out of line, how is it going to be free enough to regulate the stress response? Our way of accessing the vagus nerve could be through humming that we were talking about earlier and deep breathing, because that's what stimulates the vagus nerve. So if you're feeling really stressed and anxious, you want to think vagus nerve and tapping into the vagus nerve to help relax you, which is like humming or deep sighing, the noise where you go, ugh, that kind of noise when you're breathing out. That will stimulate the vagus nerve because of it going through the channel. It's like pressing it and asking it to work.
Yeah.
Support me.
We could talk about that another time as well. There's a lot of things we could talk about regarding the vagus nerve and its broader implications for health. I want to talk a little bit about fasting because I spent the last couple of years doing a lot of fasting for a medical condition, which helped me tremendously. I see there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that periodic fasting isn't just about weight management, but it's a powerful tool for mental clarity, which is something I experienced. It's an ancient practice, and this ancient practice, I see is finding new support in modern neuroscience, particularly its effects on brain-derived neurotropic factor and the cellular cleanup processes. What are the changes in cognitive function you typically observe in patients who incorporate fasting?
So when you fast, you give your digestive system a chance to work on the immune system, because you don't want to keep on eating and drinking because you're giving the digestive system a job to be doing. Whereas if 70 or 80% of our immune system comes from our gut, we need to have the gut not digesting food because we want it to support the immune system. This will reduce inflammation in the brain and balance the free radicals, and it will help the management of the oxidative stress in the brain by giving the digestive system time to do its anti-inflammatory job, because we need a balance within the brain between the free radicals, the antioxidants, to reduce the oxidative stress. And that's primarily what you'll be doing if you're fasting, and reducing brain fog that way, because you're reducing inflammation and stress in the tissues around the brain. And because of the direct connection between the gut and the brain through the vagus nerve and other axes within the brain. We've got the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis, and the hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis. So they read these axes that are in the brain, then they connect with our organs, our hormonal system as well. So when you fast, you're giving your body a chance to go into recovery rather than just trying to digest the food you've just eaten. That's why fasting is so beneficial. Fasting could just be overnight through to midday the next day.
I was going to ask you if there are any fasting protocols that you found most effective for improving cognitive health or cognitive function.
So I would say this most simplest is to not eat after 6 or 7 p.m. through to 12 o'clock the next day. So your window of eating would be from 12 until 6. That's 6 hours. But some people will only have a window of 4 hours to eat. The rest of the time they don't eat. They'll drink water, but they won't put food into their body. They are healing for that length of time. It's a good place to start if you are chronically unwell in whatever area of illness that is, or pain even, whatever you're suffering with, to really think about detoxing and fasting. Allow your body to do its own repairing. Support it by not eating and drinking all the time. Water's excluded. We need water. For every single function in the body, we need at least 2 liters of water a day, and more if you're perspiring. If you've got a physically demanding job or you're going to a sauna, you're going to need to drink more water. Sweating is really good because that's also a way of clearing heavy metals from the body. So it's really good to sweat, but then you do need to have more water then.
The brain has a high water content, which makes it particularly sensitive to a hydration status. Even mild dehydration can significantly impact cognitive performance, but many people are chronically underhydrated.
You're right. Water's so important for the brain. And it's surprising how many of my patients tell me how little they drink. They find it really difficult as a piece of homework that I give them to drink more water. And that's one of the simplest things I can tell them to do. Your cognitive will improve with going to drink some water. If you drank a pint of water, you're going to think straighter afterwards because your cells need to be hydrated. And of course, if you're drinking lots of coffee, lots of tea, they say for every cup of coffee, you need 6 glasses of water. Your 2 liters of water is definitely not going to be enough because that's just about enough to counteract a couple of cups of coffee. But definitely need to be drinking more water.
Can you explain the relationship between hydration and cerebrospinal fluid function?
Spinal fluid is a fluid, so we need to hydrate the fluid system. I think it's as simple as that, really. Most of the tissues in the body are fluid, like they say 80% water. We tend to think we're not really that much water because we can feel tissue, but actually we don't realize that every single cell is vibrating and there's fluid all around the cells. For the lymphatic system, of course, we need to have water. It's what is going to help us detox all the other toxins.
In terms of exercise, we think of exercise as something we do to stay in shape, to lose weight, or to build strength. But one of the greatest benefits of exercise is actually happening in our brain. When we move our bodies, we're not just improving our muscles, we're enhancing our cognitive function, our mood, and overall mental clarity. How does movement influence the brain when we exercise? Does it influence our neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine?
So it will encourage dopamine release when you're exercising. It's like it encourages endorphins to reduce pain. It's a dopamine release, which we need to regulate our emotions and to feel calm. That's why a lot of people turn to alcohol and then it becomes alcoholism or drugs and some addictions because they desperately want the dopamine fix, which they get from alcohol, but it's false. Whereas it would be much better to go and exercise rather than sitting at home drinking a bottle of wine because you'd get the dopamine in a much healthier way.
Beautiful. I know there are many things I want to speak to you about in terms of prayer and getting a deeper penetration on sleep, decision making, and habits. I think all these things are part of health. And I see that healing is a deeply personal journey that requires patience, awareness, and an open mind. When we explore ancient and modern wisdom and technology, we can liberate or unlock profound healing potential and create lasting transformations in our health and our consciousness. What's the most profound lesson you've learned from your work in advanced healing techniques?
It's the cranial sacral work that I do. It's the
Yeah.
influence of the cerebrospinal fluid flow. It takes a long time to be able to connect with it. It's really difficult to connect with it because the movement is so hard to feel. We call it palpate. It's so hard to palpate it. But oh my goodness, when you can palpate it and you can help manipulate it to create a balance or an alignment or a better energy, miracles literally happen. There is no other word for it. It's a miracle because you cannot explain the recovery that person has made. It has to be a miracle of that person's body that's enabled that response of healing. So the cranial sacral system, and it's not well known about, and it needs to be more well known because millions of people could do their own healing if they have help to access that. Such an important part of that person's healing journey. It should be that everybody could access their cranial sacral system, have somebody work with them to access it and open up their ability to heal emotionally, psychologically, mentally, physically. It puts all of that together. There isn't anything that's not reachable. I would say for sure the profound effect of the cranial sacral system, which osteopathy is known since 1874, and then the biofrequency work, being able to access healing in a new way, innovation, being able to analyze the frequency that we're in. And that's extraordinary, isn't it? Technology, and it tells you your emotions and then gives you back biofrequency music, binaural beats to listen to start promoting a healing response. And I've witnessed the effect of that on myself and so many patients. I had a patient when she wasn't even a patient, but she was listening to the biofrequency music every single day and was given 72 hours to live. The daughter played the music to her in her hospital bed every day. She was unconscious at the time. She was told she would never walk, talk, or eat normally again. And that's if she survived the 72 hours. The biofrequency music was played every single day to her. This lady walked out of hospital 111 days later, eating, talking, walking normally. Power of that biofrequency music, prayer as well, because the family are Christian, they were praying. That's frequency as well. Wow, again, that's a miracle. You can't explain that in any other way. That is the power that each one of us has in being able to heal ourselves. We have that power. We just need to know a little bit more about it, have more understanding and awareness to make a difference to ourselves.
In wrapping up, where can people find you? And do you have any wisdom or a message you want to give the audience?
Listen to the whispers of your body before they become massive screams. Always take seriously the communication that your body is having with you. That brain fog or the pain or the twitch or the lack of energy, whatever it is, take it seriously and take action on it. Seek help with someone. I do work remotely. I can use virtual consultations. That's without my hands-on healing, but I can help someone understand their problem, get back on track, or seek the right support from somebody. I can be found at worcesterosteo.com. I've set up a new YouTube channel and I'm putting out 3 videos every day with useful tips so that I can inspire, educate, and empower people so they can heal themselves. That's Healing with Michelle Davies on YouTube. I can offer your listeners a free PDF copy of my book, Mental Clarity, so they can access the 10 chapters, daily habits to improve mental clarity, improve focus. And that can be found at braincareexpert.com.
Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show today and for sharing your valuable insights, expertise, and experience with us. Your dedication to healing and helping others really inspires me. It's been a real privilege to learn from your wisdom. Your work in brain care and osteopathy and holistic healing has touched so many lives. And I very much appreciate the passion and knowledge you've brought to this conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you as well, because if I could change one person's life by this one podcast, that makes me happy. So thank you for this platform to be able to inspire and help more people.